Yes. So yeah, we're on. Okay, we're way past the hour now at 6 minutes. I was gonna suggest we do a round of introductions. So we all get to know each other. Well, I'm as a host. I'll start. Well, most of you know me, and I am Hisham, and I started this project, and I have presented at FOSDEM 2019. Like I started writing it like around the end of 2018, and like around a month of hacking in the weekends, and I got it to a point where I could present something at FOSDEM. Where in 2019 I presented a history of the attempts of and the projects and all of the history of the difficulties of typing Lua. Really tough project, and but I'm like standing on the shoulders of everyone who came before, and I'm preparing an intro for Andre. uh, and then I presented in FOSDEM 2019 while the compiler was still like not compiling itself, but it was almost there. In 2020, I did a presentation where I said, hey, the compiler is compiling itself, people can use it. And I was invited so that 2021 in February I will present. So it's going to be a trilogy, part 3. But yeah, super happy to see like a community starting to form around and all of that. So yeah, so just here to try to like get this community together and started. So Andre, would you introduce yourself?
Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Andre. I'm friends of Hisham. We met when I was doing my PhD. When I was doing my PhD, I was actually working on typed Lua. Not sure if you all are familiar with typed Lua.
Yeah.
But the problem, I had some issues with academic life, and I had to go back to industry. And for these reasons, I couldn't kept working on typed Lua. So nowadays I'm working on training and not that much with types anymore, but hopefully I can find some time to play with Timor. So I think that's about me.
How do I do this? Someone else jumps in? Should I? Enrique, go
I
for
can
it.
go. So I'm a developer from Spain. I have recently worked with Hisham, so not anymore, regretfully. And I use Lua on my day job. And Teal interests me as a regular user. I don't know if I will be able to involve myself on the development side of things, but at least as a user, I'm interested on it. And I'm going to say that Pierre should present himself now because I know him. Hi, Pierre.
So yeah, hi. So I'm Pierre. I've been using Lua for 13 or 14 years now. I have been using it professionally for about 7 years, but I don't anymore because I changed companies and we don't use Lua. At least I didn't introduce Lua to this company yet because I did it at 2 already. Yeah, I know Hisham from the Lua community. I've seen his presentations about TL and so on. And I'm kind of interested in this kind of types approach, which I've already used in Python. For instance, I've used type Python with types from Python 3. I've used TypeScript as well, so like I can understand what it does. And I started to play with Teal because I did Advance of Code. So I started to play with it at the beginning of the month, and I decided to do Advance of Code with Teal. So I found a few issues while doing the exercises, and I opened a few issues and did I think 2 PRs or 3 PRs on Teal because of that.
Who's next?
And next.
So, you want to do it? Sorry, how do you pronounce your name? Timur?
Timur.
Timur?
Timur.
Timur, okay. Do you want to go or should I go first?
You.
Okay. So I'm William. I am a computer science major. I never worked professionally with Lua, but it was my first contact with computer science and a Minecraft mod of all things. So it kind of holds a special place in my heart, Lua, uh, teaching me programming in some sense. I the reason I found Teal was the same as Pierre. I found it because of Advent of Code. I started doing the first ones in Lua, then I looked online for type dialects of Lua. I found type Lua, and I found Teal. And then, yeah, one of the I missed a few things from not being like meta tables pretty much. That was the main thing I missed about Lua and Teal, like supporting call and addition. Some problems just kind of needed for not to be too verbose. So I looked to Penlight, then I realized they didn't have you guys didn't have support, so I opened an issue, and yeah, that's all. That's pretty much the whole story. When the Penlight thing is done, and if you guys are willing to prioritize meta tables, I'd be glad to help discussion, implementation, everything like that.
Exactly. We do want to have some object-oriented stuff in Teal. Exactly. I'm desperately waiting.
Right, Timur, go on with your intro.
Oh, okay. Despite my age, I'm still relatively new in all this law stuff because, well, I have joined the Tarantool team only this February. Then all these pandemics have covered us, and when I have seen your for the presentation, I was absolutely buying all this type of law stuff because, well, as a former and current C++ programmer, I quite uncomfortable working with dynamic type system, and still is because, well, there's some lack of some tooling here, which I used to there, and I do want to add some Teal support eventually to Tarantool
Nice.
runtime, but a major thing which I'm still waiting for is just object oriented because, well, I want it for myself. To not mess with all this meta table stuff because it's well, okay, it's uncomfortable. And I do believe for Teal and Lua Rocks and two key factors which allows to strengthen Lua ecosystem a lot because, well, two or three, well, legit threat. And we do want to add some advancement here and there. That's why I'm here. And also, I thank you for HTOP. Absolutely.
Oh yes, thank you.
Thank you, Akisham. And do Tilde want to say something?
They said they were lurking, but if you want to come out and say anything, just feel free.
Yeah, and in chat, they said like I'm Fang from GitHub. Yeah, so yeah, it's fine. It's fine. So feel free, feel comfortable for. So yeah, now that we went through the rounds, yeah, I can touch a little on. I think a good starter for the conversation is like what's missing, and
Oh, and another person just joined. Hello,
Darren.
Darren.
Hey, yeah, Darren has just joined. Yeah, he's another former colleague from Kong.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, if he wants to unmute and join in and introduce himself, feel free. But not sure if it's on already. Yeah, so I think it's something pinged in the chat. Oh yeah,
He's
Darren
driving.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Yeah, so yeah, since Timur and William, we both mentioned like metatables, the call and object orientation. Yeah, let me discuss a little bit of that. I have looked a bit on this, and I spent a lot of time thinking about it. So right now I was a little like reluctant on how to do it, and I think I should stop being reluctant and we should just jump in and try something, because in the other things I decided to just be brave. And even though because there are some things that are very difficult in language design, for example, generics, and I decided to just do it, even though it has like problems and limitations and things like that. So if you compare like the current implementation of Teal for generics compared to TypeScript or Java, not even going to go into C++ or without the template meta programming, but like Teal's implementation of generics is super simple because you cannot constrain the type arguments. So you can say you have like vector of T, but you can't say anything about T, right? So mostly it's useful it's almost like for collections and things like that, and a few like generic callback functions here and there. But if you look at the use, for example, in the TL.tl, the Teal compiler, the places I use generics, like I did like the tree walk for type checking and the tree walk for code generation, they use the same iteration function, right? So it's generic on the callbacks. So it works. It works. It's very limited, but it works. So I guess starting simple was a successful thing. Union types, also the same thing. I was very scared of doing union types because there are runtime restrictions. Because when you have to destructure on that, like the union type, like you have to do if you have a type that says if number or string, right? How do you use that variable?
Yeah.
Right?
Sorry, I just didn't say that, but we can talk later about the object-oriented stuff, because I do object-oriented stuff, and I think you can do some stuff in at least like methods and so on. It works, but this it's an issue for me for Adventure Code. I didn't talk too much about it, but I think because the issue is that you resolve the type at runtime.
Yes,
yeah, and you don't want to do it at compile time, because if you did it at compile time, like you could have a union of any kind of record.
Yeah, but the problem is that you have things like when you have a union type, you have to have a way to match it at runtime. Like there are things like if, so that's why I have like the is operator, like there was like this addition. If X is string, it generates code like if type X equals string. Right?
Yeah, because you don't do things like, because for now you don't do like dead code elimination and so on. But like if you do the way Haskell, for instance, they don't have tabs at runtime. They erase everything, I think.
They have for type classes, which is exactly where which is exactly where those things like you have to do some dynamic dispatching. So in the end, I decided to, for example, for unions, I decided, okay, we're going to put a limitation, the compiler detects the limitation and say you can do a union of everything you want as long as only one of them is a table at most, right? So you can do a union of Boolean or string or array of strings. And then like if the type returns table, then I know it's that type, right? At runtime, you can cheat and just, if it answers, table, I know which one it was. And only one function, because type also returns function, and you can't have like a union of different functions. Right?
Another idea I had with that, because I thought about it, because I really like, some of my code is ugly because I can't do union types currently. And
yes.
So there are like, I know what you wanted to do is, one idea you had in GitHub was using metatables.
Yes.
It's kind of like, for me, it's the same discussion that we had in Lua, in the Lua mailing list regarding how do you disambiguate between an array and a map. It's the same thing. It's not a really good idea to enforce a metatable on every object just for this. So it's better to have a function in the type. You could do that. You could have a function that you give to the type that does what it wants. Like the user can define the way to disambiguate.
Yes.
Like-
So yeah, that's exactly where I've been arriving as well.
Okay.
Because what I was thinking was to have something like an is meta method, right? Something like that. But since we have a compiler, we can just make it a plain function. It doesn't even need a meta
Yeah.
table. But you could define that. Here's my implementation of is for this type, right? For this record type, for example, so that whenever the code said if X is foo, then you can just call that function in the right place.
Interesting.
Yeah,
And-
it's
and
same
do
things
that.
that we have in Lua JSON, in message pack and stuff like that, because we already have that for message pack because there are types in message pack.
Yes, because one thing I hit, and I remember like a lot of when I said like I was standing on the shoulders of the work that Andre did, like was not just to flatter him because he was here, but to really, I feel like I have like a huge advantage whenever I think of any of those issues, because I remember like for almost everything here, Andre and Fabio, his like co-advisor, they already went through discussions of this and did a lot of that stuff. Because I remember, for example, when I tried to do a little bit of defining the types for Love API, right? The Love 2D, and I was just trying to play with it. And one of the first things that I hit was also like, because Love is very object oriented like that.
Yeah.
And they have methods for like how do you have like a surface, then a surface can be an image or it can be a texture. Like, you know, there's like a little class hierarchy, and they have methods for checking this, right? And I said like, okay, the right thing to do with that, if my is operator should generate that method, like call that method from the Love library, right? And we can't change the library, right? So I remember a long time ago, Fabio was saying like he thought that if to do like typed Lua with object oriented, like it needs to be like a plugin system, because different object types need to generate different code. Because like if you're generating objects for the Love 2D, then like the type testing is like a different kind of method from like the message pack objects, and right to make those things interact. Someone in the Teal issues mentioned an experiment with trying to do some meta programming like that for in which like you could define like this is my class generator function. When the compiler sees this function call, like a function called class, it needs to like register a new type. Like so you could define like callbacks for your compiler. So you could have like an extensible compiler that would learn special tricks based on which
sounds like
library.
a macro system.
Yes, kind of like a macro system, yes. But it's things like, but instead of like just doing macro expansion, you're actually like, it's almost like a compiler plugin in which it changes the internal state of the compiler as it goes, right?
They probably do this kind of thing. I don't know if you looked at a type list, but they probably have the same issue with type lists, because everything is like a const cell, and so you need types for, like, you can't disambiguate easily at runtime, and it's like they probably have some kind of macro stuff because I don't know how they do it in Lisp.
Yeah,
But well,
so,
I want object-oriented stuff for simplification for programming in Lua, not for complicating. Please be careful.
Yes, that's a great point. That's a great point, because if you start going that way, you end up in C++, right?
Yeah, so maybe just simple operator overloading for now, and then we can think about extending it somehow.
Yeah, so because one thing I've been looking at, which is kind of like an annoying thing that someone has to do it, and was looking at the subtyping rules and relations, which is like a super delicate part of the code. And when I wrote the first time, I was just like, just let's get something that runs. Like I wasn't, because that was the big difference with typed Lua, because for typed Lua, Andre was being like super careful about all of the type rules of the system. He had like the formal definition on all of them. And I was just kind of like guessing my way through. So now there are obvious mistakes in there, but like it mostly works. So I just took like the pragmatic versus correctness thing and took all the way to, on one direction because I wanted to have something running. So, but eventually over time, like Andrea's knowledge is going to be very useful because we're probably going to have to go back to your thesis and read things again. Like, what was the rule again for getting correct union types? Because
Fang just posted a really interesting comment. Where do you draw the line between things you do with the language and things the language does for you? Traditionally, OOP is something you build with Lua, right? Yes, that is right.
yes.
I'm not sure how much I buy the idea of having built-in like literal classes. I like the idea of records. Classes for me might be a bit too much, but that's just my opinion. I do miss being just able to use operator overloading, and that's why I'm just so intent on seeing this through, because this is a part of the syntax that's completely unavailable for us. With regards to classes, we can discuss, we can talk about it this whole time.
So how do you do right now in Teal for doing classes and objects? Do you have a
We just have
class
records.
system?
No, we just have records and they don't have subtyping relations between them. So you can't basically like the.
So you don't have inheritance, for instance?
No. So, but this question from Fang is really good, and William has a point. So on one hand, we could go like the say, hey, JavaScript did not have a class system, TypeScript added one, and now everybody loves it, right? We could, because there's always there are so many different incompatible class systems in Lua, and maybe if the language just comes and offers one, it could, in the Teal world, that would be settled. So that's kind of tempting. On the other hand, if we were to start small, I think there are things that are going to be needed for records. Like we need XKCD about standards, exactly. So but in the other hand, these objective things that you're asking for, like meta table support in records, is something that we need to have anyway, with or without classes.
Yes.
But once you have meta tables with records, you can kind of do classes the same way you do in Lua, right? Except for actually telling the compiler about understanding inheritance, which is what Andrea said. So one thing I did a experimental branch in Teal repo, I think it's there still, for tagged records, in which I would say like one of the attributes of the record is magical, and it's the tag. So you could use that like as a class name or as an identifier, and then you could establish like some sort of subtyping relationships between records with like record full, like record circle is shape, and then just teach the compiler about the inheritance tree. There it is. So and then I could use the tag because it was marked as special in the is operator as well, right? So it was almost this little object system hiding as tagged records there. So one thing I was thinking would be there's a comment in the chat. Let's say yes, tagged unions. They're very important. Like it's one thing. Like I would like to have that too, because once you get used to things like Haskell with like types and cases and things like that. Because right now I have a huge record type that says node, and another huge one that says type. So like every possible node of the AST, right? And if I had different cases for them, like an expression node, the print, the if node, they would have different keys and will be all the same, like children of node, right? And the same thing for types. So like I am missing this feature now, and I thought about doing tagged unions instead of doing classes, because sometimes languages that have one don't have the other. Like in Haskell, I think Rust, you can also you don't have inheritance, right? But you have interfaces, which is a different kind.
Yeah, and Hisham, that's what I was thinking about object orientation, because for me, like I use objects, like I have stuff with meta tables, and the meta table is usually just indexed with methods, and that you can already do like pretty well in Teal, because you just put function types in the record and it works, and that's an interface. And I'm not sure I want more than that, because I want like that's kind of what Go does. I don't want inheritance in types. The interfaces, there is no good reason to have inheritance. It would be more interesting to be able to say that an object implements several interfaces.
Right.
Yes.
Then, like,
yes.
I at least that's the way I write code, and that's like, I don't need inheritance in the types at all. I'm never going to use it. But,
that is a very Rust-like approach, and I like Rust, the way Rust does it. So.
Right. So yeah, implements in terms of inheritance of interfaces, right? Like it's not of implementation, right? Because implementation implies that whole chain of index methods and all of that, which
yeah, but you don't need to know that at the type level.
Yes, we don't. Right. So yeah, because then like another thing is another thing in question is like, how does the syntax for that looks like for declaring meta tables? Then of course there's the whole bike shed around that. And yeah, because one thing I was thinking was possibly doing allowing you to annotate subtyping relationships in terms of like record X is Y, like, but maybe it could be implements in a sense of interfaces, right? But then just let the user implement their own like is call, right, for that type, so that the type checking.
Yeah, basically, if you can say like X equals object colon something, like it implements, it has two types, like it is something and something else. It has both interfaces.
Right.
And that implements two interfaces. It's exactly that.
Kind of like the opposite of a union. Instead of being one or the other, it's all at the same time.
That's intersection types. The opposite
it's
of
like,
union
it's like you want to write like IO is reader and writer. It's basically that is the example that you see all the time in Go, for instance. I don't use Go, but there are a lot of resemblances between Go and Lua, so that's why I look at Go. It kind of has the same.
You mean you would like to specify it as a variable implements two interfaces?
Yeah.
And then like only things that do implement both interfaces can connect?
Oh yeah, that's
can be assigned to it?
I didn't get the last question.
For example, like if are you asking for? I'm gonna write in the Zoom chat, and Darren made a comment there about like Lua.
You could share the screen.
Future spec of Lua, but I don't see that happening because the Lua
you can
also
share your screen if you.
Yeah, I can share screen. Yeah, we can screen share as well. Yeah, because share screen sometimes is too. Yeah, like you mean something like this, like say we have you want a variable like your object is, which is of a type like reader.
I don't think we can see your screen.
Yeah.
At least I can't. Oh,
I can.
I found it.
Like this?
Like yeah. I want to do that. And then if you have a function that takes a reader, it works. If you have a function that takes a writer, it works as well.
Come on.
That's exactly what the Go does. It's like interfaces. It's the definition of interfaces.
Yeah, but do you mean in this sense, for example, like I don't know, like socket, and you want to say that it implements, let's call it whatever.
Yeah. You could do
reader and writer.
Yeah,
that's better, but not. Please.
No. I mean, no, but that was when you were using like, okay, so then I do my, right?
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, I did my socket. I have a. I think you are asking about. So then there are places that need a reader, right? And then you can put S because S is a reader. There are places that need a writer, and then you can put S as well.
Yes.
Right, because I think someone mentioned like something that is both.
Yeah, for like passing as a parameter.
Yeah, so I need, for example, you have a function, right?
Yeah.
And you need an object here, and this object you want to write on it, and you want to read.
Yes.
That means you want something that implements both.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Then
think that.
So
Sorry.
this would be an intersection type of two
Concepts.
interfaces, right? Which is different. Which is exactly the dual, the opposite of a union type. Right?
Yeah, makes sense given the name.
So you would say, and even the science here, because like you want something that is a writer and a reader. Right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Because it would have like this would have a write function.
Why do you use 3 spaces for indentation?
Because I started as a kid and I never stopped.
But I think a lot of projects. I think you did the same thing in the what was the project? The project with Zavante and so on. In Kepler.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
it was 3 spaces.
Yeah, rocks and all of that.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, and in the end, like I like it makes like a little tree of and.
Fair enough.
Looks nice.
Fair enough. I mean,
and also like it annoys everybody equally.
now that's a good reason.
The 2 spaces and the 4 spaces team, like that. So yeah, but then you like, okay, if you have this, right, then we need this, and probably it would make sense that you can only do intersections of interfaces, right? Because then there's like you shouldn't be doing crazy thing like I want something that is a number and and a map of booleans to like like,
oh god, no, stop.
Yeah, it gets complicated.
So
yeah, it gets complicated real fast. But
what happens if both define the same named function? We both have read or write.
That's
like an overload for
If you have a type reader that reads and also does foo, and the writer also writes and does foo. Then I guess the first one you put wins, or the last one. You have to choose one of those.
Or we can detect and give an error.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or we can support both, which is so one thing that does exist right now in Teal is again, like I'm being very pragmatic and adding features, but not letting the practical restrictions stop us. But in Teal, you can do this. You can declare a function.
Yeah.
Twice with different. And why is this like in a record? And why is this? Because you can't implement the function several times, right? This is used in the definition files for things that are implemented in C, because sometimes you have like C functions that are very freaky with what they accept. Even like in the standard library, if you think of the
GSUB and stuff like that. Like if you look in Teal itself, it's full of stuff like that.
Yeah, it's several functions in one, right? Like like you have
where the output depends on the arguments. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Like this one, like debug traceback. You can pass you can pass two arguments, 3
Oh yeah, well actually you could not define this in a strict typing language, and you just allow a variable argument list. That's it.
No, but you can, because what you're doing is the same. If you look at Haskell, it's the same. You want 2 functions with different signatures. You can.
Yeah.
You define it twice. It's frequent. And the interface sync is exactly the same. It's like interface in Java. If you have 2 interfaces with the same method in Java, you can do it. It implements the method.
Yeah, let me see if I can
It's your
find an example here in Penlight while you show this.
Yeah, so yeah, it's similar things happen in Penlight as well, and so yeah, it currently is allowed. So maybe if we wanted to just combine everything from the interfaces, we could just let it slide and say, okay, let's do that, and just combine both and assume that the function that the method implements. Of course, then there's complications like what happens with generics. Then like, okay, socket of T implements reader of T and writer of T. Where does the types propagate? There's
But
these
will be okay without generics first iteration of object-oriented programming. Because, well, you see Go could live without generics 10 years long.
Yeah, Go didn't have generics, and it had interfaces, and it even had a how do you say that? It guessed the interface. So like
Inference?
Inference.
it had interface inference. So if you didn't even need to define that something implements reader. If you implement all the methods that are defined in reader, you automatically implement reader in Go.
Yeah.
And that's the difference with Java, because in Java you have to write implements. And actually I prefer that you have to write implements, because it's kind of avoids the issue that like Enrique was saying, like you have two different functions with the same signature, but they don't do the same thing. And like by mistake, you have something that implements reader, but it should not. So,
yeah, that is one. I like this for two reasons. One, being explicit. One, because it's easier to make the compiler, and two, because for that reason that Pierre said. Generally, I'm trying to make the type system tend towards being nominal, where that means things are matched by name, not structural, that things are matched by shape, right? Because then you change the shape and then everything that was compatible stops being, or things that happen to have the same shape, it's 3 numbers here, it's 3 numbers there, but one is like RGB and the other is XYZ, and now you can mistake one for the other because they have the same shape. So some things are structural, like functions and but records, I am forcing them to be nominal. For example, that's why you cannot put like a record definition in an argument or in a type definition. You can say like local x : record like it's a record, with anonymous. There are no anonymous records, right? There are no anonymous records now, and it's just to force the nominal matching.
Does Teal have like the concept of strict, like TypeScript? So a lot of times in non-strict mode in TypeScript, the inference system can take care, so you don't really have to tell your your variable that it's a specific type, because the function has a return type, and then but in strict mode it would like warn you that you're setting it might implement any.
So what Teal currently has, and which I did this early on, but I don't really see people using it. I don't hear a lot of feedback about it, and so I don't even know if it's worth putting development effort on. But from the very beginning, the compiler has 2 different behaviors if you give it a file with name.lua or with a name.tl. It can actually process files with name.lua. But then everything that is not typed, it just types it as unknown. And unknown is compatible with everything, and it's just like it's like any, and it never complains. And so there's a bunch of if statements inside the compiler that say like, which I called it, I did the opposite. I called the other one lax mode instead of strict. So no, it doesn't have a strict mode, but it has a lax mode. So in lax mode, it just accepts like if arguments are missing, if things are like, it just assumes that they're not annotated. But like I never use it really at this point. It's there. I have some tests of it. I don't know if the coverage is very good, but I've been looking like on Monday. I spent like the whole afternoon like reading the threads from the TypeScript GitHub on when because they added now strict indexing. No undefined. I don't know. It's not in strict, but it's a new flag in TypeScript 4.1, which if you index an array, it returns an optional like type. You know, array of number. If you do like t of I, you get a number or undefined, right? Because which is the reality, right? So
yeah, but we don't have that in Teal because the nil is always implicit. It's always or nil.
Exactly.
Yes.
Everything is always on nil, but this was the way that. But TypeScript has the strict mode in which you can say that things are not nil, and the reason why I never even considered adding that stricter mode in Teal was because of tables, and they can always return nil. But TypeScript now has like done this step in September. This is like recent, in which they added the mode in which they force you to test the returns of
But
indexing.
you won't have this issue if in pure Teal code, if you use Lua tables, yeah, sure, they can always return nil. But if you stop having implicit nil everywhere, which is one of the discussions that we have on GitHub, like if you have optional arguments, for instance, for functions, explicit, like with a question mark or something like that, and the same thing for record fields. Like if you can't define, like if you say there is a number in a record, it can't be nil, it's a number. And then you say like, you get this key from the record, you know it's a number, it's not nil.
Yeah,
so
for records that's easier actually, because you can catch them in constructor and like you can force them to always be set. But arrays really like they don't have a length, right? So arrays can always contain nil. So that was
we could add a length to arrays and have
Yeah,
fixed
but
length arrays and dynamic arrays, and then
fixed length arrays are really tuples now, right? They were just added.
yeah, which I was like super happy, and I wanted to give a shout out to Corey from the Gitter community and in GitHub, because I think this was like the first like major language feature that arrived as a PR, like complete with all the tests and everything, and like it was amazing to just like add something to like he's on fire. He just added warnings like this week. I was hoping to see him here in the call because I would like to meet this person. But so that was like that was super exciting. But yes, and this is another thing that made me think of Typed Lua and Andreas' work, because I added enums, which are a form of like a restricted set of literal strings, which have proven to be very useful. Like
Yes.
I caught so many bugs like since I like working in the compiler. Right, you make a typo and say like this is not a valid string, or like you cannot put this here. Like I mistake like a list of something, like variable is not. You have to use identifier. Like it catches like it's really good. Like so, but it's kind of an ad hoc feature that I added just because using strings as enums in Lua is so common.
Yeah.
But then Corey added tuples, and in tuples he had that notion of the length. It's kind of like a table with a known length, and that length has to propagate and all of that. So in the end, I was thinking, all right, we are really doing literal types here, aren't we? Like, because there's always like something in the computer science literature behind you who already figured this out before you did. And because typed Lua, you did have like literal strings as unique types, right?
Yes, not just strings, but numbers as well.
Yeah, it's the same in TypeScript. I was wondering about that as well. Like in TypeScript, there are literal types, and you don't need unions because it's a union type of strings.
Exactly. So the enum is really a union of literal strings, and then it works. And also, when you get to tuples, like a union of numbers, which are the valid indexes of the tuples, if you can restrict it like that, then you can always know that it's a valid value and those sorts of things, right? So maybe eventually, at least the internals of the compiler should switch into using this more uniform representation. Like I currently have some bugs because the literal inference is not propagating correctly all the way. Like 99% of the time it works, but if you do something funky, passing it around, it could be smarter. So I'm guessing we need to have literal types eventually, and then maybe we can even like remove the enums and just make them. Because now you can name any type as well. Before you could not. It was like local blah, blah, blah is a record, but you could not, for example, do aliases of like function types. Now you can alias any type you can write with a name.
Almost.
So now you
You still can't define a type as generics, only record support generics, right?
Yes, which I was looking at it this week actually, and there is another branch there, and then I hit a bug, and then I opened an issue. There's an issue 290, which is like the very last one. So I was playing with adding generics in the type definition like that. If you, yeah,
Yeah, it would be really useful to define a comparator function as a generic type. Or
yeah.
something
So
like that.
exactly, because now you type like local type my record equals record generic.
Yeah.
Like moving the generic to this side, to the left-hand side of the definition. So I implemented this, and it was, at first it was like working okay, and then I realized, I can write this now, and it works.
Huh.
But then if you can write this, you can also write this, which is currently an invalid union.
Oh.
I explain here because you can't do the type checking, right? So that means that I sort of fixed this in that branch, this branch, which is uploaded there, type args and types.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you move there's a function called like is valid union that tests for the restrictions. If a union is valid, like you can't do a union of two array types because then the is operator, this is impossible to check, right?
Yeah.
Because they're both just stable at runtime. So so what happened was that, okay, this is sort of fixable, but then I realized the problem already exists. This you can write in Teal today, and it type checks. You can create a record with two generics, make a union of them, it's happy. And then like if you make unions of primitive types, it works. It builds you a union of the things you asked for. But then you build the union of non-primitive types that it cannot, it also works. Like,
yeah.
which at first this looks fine, like it generates the code you expect and runs as you expect, except if you use the is operator on the union. The is cannot tell apart this one and this one because at runtime they're just both tables, right? So this is it's fixable, but yeah, I was looking into this. So this is good feedback. This is good to know that this is wanted because I was just like inventing this off the top of my head. But
really, the main part I want about this is just being able to declare generic function types. So if this whole thing you described is too much, like generic function types, I think would cover a lot of ground.
Yeah, but can't you do this? Like, you can do this, right?
Can you?
Yes.
Okay then. I was just being dumb. Never mind.
No, yeah.
Well,
no. You can do, because right now there's only two places where you can put type arguments, which is in records, like next to function and next to record.
Okay,
right?
I see.
But if you move it here, right?
Yeah, I think I was trying to put the angle brackets anywhere on the left hand side, and that's why I never got to work. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but really, I think it does make more sense on this side, really, right? But then you can do things like this, right? It becomes a lot more powerful because you can do things like this or a function that
it does feel more powerful, but is it too powerful though? Because I don't know. Because we also need to keep in mind how complex the compiler is gonna have to be to process all of this. I have no experience in compilers, as I said in the stream.
Yeah, that's a good point and something to keep in mind. Like, and maybe at one point, if the implementation just goes too complex, maybe it's time to step back, right? I think there's a balance there between the complexity of the compiler and the language, but sometimes it's actually simpler, right? Because when things are more general, right? Everything becomes like this recursive algorithm thing, right?
Yeah, so, as I said, I don't know if this will actually make it more complex, but it would seem for someone with no experience in this that it would add a lot more edge cases that would lead to errors.
Yeah. So I did this and I hit the edge cases that led to errors. I have in the other branch I have a test. Where is it? in that branch, I have a test that currently like causes a Stack Overflow on the compiler. And where, how do I look at the commits? Yeah, with a big X. So the code for doing this is here now. So you see, like this works. This, I moved the check around, so this works.
Are you sharing your screen? I'm new to
I'm
Zoom,
not sharing my screen, and I'm talking.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I added this, for example, this works. This, I moved the check around, so this really checks. Then I hit a bug. Yeah, so this fails with a Stack Overflow, and I do like.
Oh.
Yeah, because it starts recursing on the. There's a union, like a type of a type where it expands to a union type, which variables that have the same name but different scopes, and it just got lost in there. It's a bug, right? But fixing this will require quite a internal refactor. But I think it's actually the right thing to do, because it's probably like this is hitting because there's a bug, and it's kind of like, yeah, the algorithm is just not right. So yeah, there are some complicated things here and there, and yeah, we are. I think we'll leave this one to this meeting to the hour. So I think we should be wrapping up. But one general thing I want to say is that right now I'm feeling kind of torn between trying to tackle these hard problems or adding more features. Right? Like, you know, like keeping the 99% that's working, and like try to fix the 1% with the hard problems, or just put the useful features. And
I see. I don't know, because like I know we have to wrap up, and so, but yeah, we need to discuss this in a written way. So maybe we need a mailing list or something for Teal, or just like keep using issues. But because this problem does not exist in TypeScript, and it does not exist because it resolves types at compile time. And like I'm thinking about what you said before, that you can't do discriminated unions because you resolve at runtime, and you need a way to resolve at runtime. But TypeScript doesn't. Like, it gives you the way to resolve like type off from JavaScript. You can resolve the JavaScript type at runtime, but not the TypeScript type. You can't. It's the TypeScript type. It lives in TypeScript. It's not the JavaScript type. It's not the same thing. So you don't have this issue. You can do like a union of an array of string and an array of numbers, and it works because the compiler knows. At runtime, it's your program to know how to discriminate.
Yeah, that's a that's a good point. But I think if we just add like the user definable is function, that solves it, because
no, it doesn't, because the user, at least the way I see it, maybe okay, you would define the whole function, but you mean you would do a single function is, and because how would you make it work with things like array of number and array of strings? Because I see how it could be easy only with named types, like with records and stuff like that.
Yes,
but with you could do it, but
yeah, but how would you, as we need to expand the discussion, because I want to hear like how, as a user, if I made array of number or array of string to be a valid union type, how would you use it in a program? That I would like to see. In terms of managing the I would prefer to keep it on GitHub issues and the chat and issues rather than a mailing list. Like, even for like community and tone and those kinds of things, like, because I think mailing lists, they tend to be very harsher environments, I guess. It's like it's easier, like it's more discoverable issues and all of that. So I'm trying to
go. It would be so old school. Yeah, GitHub discussions are much better.
Yeah. So yeah, like we can look at that, like GitHub discussions, if we want to do a forum and things like that. So let's consider that. So I'm not going to hold everyone back. So we are on the hour. Want to thank everybody. This was awesome, amazing. Here's my cat Pascal. We just did it.
We heard him.
Special special guest. So I think this was super useful. It was great to hear from you all the input, and let's keep doing this. I'm thinking about like doing this monthly. I guess would be a good cadence.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
I could make it today because this was my first day on leave for Christmas, so I usually am not available at this time. If it's on like a weekend or something, that's great for me, but I'm not sure about the others.
In which time zone are you?
I am in Brazil, UTC -3.
Okay, because like we are on different time zones. Like I'm on UTC +1, I think. Like it's 7 for me. It
Oh
was
yeah,
7.
no,
It's now.
yeah, I didn't mean about the time. This time is whatever for me. It's great. I just meant for
The day of the week.
weekday.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, let's open a topic to discuss like what would be like the best time, and to discuss what would be the best time. So I'll probably try to do it like around the same time, like close to the end of the month. Give it a month here. So I'll probably be prepping my talk for FOSDEM on Teal. So probably can do a preview here and get some feedback and
Yes.
this kind of stuff. So this could be a topic for the next one. So yeah.
When is FOSDEM?
February 6 and 7. It's going to be
Okay.
fully online. It's a weekend and free as always. So highly recommend to catch that if you can. Right. Well, again, thanks everyone, and see you next time. Catch you on Gitter and GitHub issues and Twitter and everything else. Right.
And hopefully see you physically someday at
Yes,
FOSDEM
hopefully.
2022, or like do a workshop in Germany someday.
Yes. If
Yeah.
I can travel in October, I'll be there. All right. Yeah.
Well,
Thank you. Bye
see
bye.
you all.
See you,
Thank
bye.
you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Right.